I've always been really curious about all the hype around bread, so I decided to investigate. Is bread a good anime? Let's start with first impressions. To be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of the art style. Water looks very wet for some reason, and everyone looks kind of shapeless. I appreciated the simplicity of giving each character one color, but felt like they should have chosen different colors. It's cool how water is transparent, but it makes them blend into the background and overall pretty unmemorable. Flour and salt's colors are essentially the same bland white, so they just don't look distinct enough. Yeast is this somewhat comforting, down to earth sandy color, which is nice though. The character personalities also showed promise. Yeast, salt, and flour's somewhat dry personalities were balanced out with water's more go with the flow philosophy. Contrasting ideologies always give a show the chance to debate and discuss what's really correct, though not all shows properly take advantage of that. After finishing the first arc, I got a better understanding of what the show would be like. Water and yeast got to know each other as well as flour and salt. Water and yeast's relationship took a fair amount of time. Because of yeast's dry personality, they didn't get along at all initially, but as time went on, yeast softened up and their friendship blossomed. I like how they took their time with this because it makes their friendship feel more meaningful, but it made Bread's pacing unbearably slow at times, almost boring. Flour and Salt's friendship developed very differently. After being confronted by a threat, some natural disaster called mixing, they got along pretty immediately. I noticed that Flour overshadowed Salt a great deal in the battle and was worried that the ensemble cast would be similarly smothered. The battle itself didn't have a ton of tension. The second arc continued, with Flour, Salt, Water, and Yeast finally coming together. They faced the same phenomenon as the last battle, but with a lot more gore and violence, to the point where I'm kind of surprised Bread isn't rated mature or something. The first Rise arc is one of the most hated arcs in the show, and that's for good reason. Nothing really happens. I was beginning to feel hopeful after the dramatic stakes and tension introduced in the last mixing arc, but started to feel bored again. Suffice it to say, I was relieved when the folding arc started and provided a refreshing bit of action. I'm glad they didn't use mixing as the only villain of the show because different forms of disaster really expanded the world building of the Bread universe. At the fifth arc, I found myself exasperated at the need for another bout of waiting, but pushed through nonetheless. It really felt like useless filler because I didn't understand the purpose of the lack of drama, plot, or action. After that, a repeat of the folding arc gave me both relief and disappointment. At the third resting arc, even though the cast was transported to a different setting, I was officially wondering if I should quit. It's not like the new setting added anything to the story. Although the shaping arc was visually interesting, it didn't change my mood, and the obligatory rising arc before the climax was nothing new either. However, when flour, salt, yeast, and water faced their final battle against some abstract primordial evil called heat, I started to find myself at the edge of my seat. As the cast struggled to survive against the heat in the oven, I could feel their anguish as water started to dissipate into the surrounding air and yeast started to die. I finally realized what I had missed, the entire point of the show, the characters. Throughout the resting arcs, I had been waiting for the next battle so impatiently that I never stopped to consider how the characters had changed and evolved. As the final episodes played out, I started to flash back to all the little moments I had missed, and the slow development I had previously dismissed. The characters and themes are the true genius of Bread. Flashy, complex plot lines aren't present because they aren't necessary. The lack of tension wasn't bad storytelling, but rather a necessary safe space for the characters to breathe and reflect. After all, each character in Bread follows a fully realized and impactful arc. Water's arc begins with loneliness, and it's heartbreaking to understand this because Water yearns to bond with others. Throughout the mixing arcs, the rising arcs, the folding, Water is the glue that held the team together, and this is because Water values friendship so much. When Water started to turn to steam to protect their teammates against the final villain, I realized that this team is all Water ever wanted. Friendship is all Water ever wanted. This makes Water's arc incredibly heartfelt and relatable because so many people out there are lonely and feel like they will never have the friendships they crave for. Water's success in achieving their dream of friendship is comforting and full of hope because you can't help but root for Water and empathize. As water's first friend, nobody understood this more than yeast. Like salt and flour, yeast never thought they needed friends, keeping to themselves and refusing to be more open to the idea of friendship. Once they met water, though, yeast started to think more fluidly and softened up. In fact, after meeting water, yeast, flour, and salt all became more fluid, less solid. The three also reined in and grounded water, which really teaches the audience both the importance of open-mindedness as well as the value of keeping a balance between stability and instability. Yeast's newfound friendships made them stronger than ever, even unlocking the ability to create carbon dioxide. The ability was developed slowly and over time during the rising arcs. I just hadn't noticed. This was a genius move because yeast's newfound strength and ability was crucial in the final battle, where their carbon dioxide allowed the team to rise to the challenge and both defeat and escape the heat of the oven. The fact that yeast's carbon dioxide emitting abilities had been building up ever since the team had been created made the final battle feel incredibly relevant and conclusive. In addition to this, the fact that yeast only discovered this ability because of their teammates goes to show that friendship makes us both stronger and smarter. We improve each other by encouraging each other to interact with new ideas and possibilities. We push each other to be our very best. Yeast learns this and shows their appreciation for their friends with their sacrifice, demonstrating how far they've come. In essence, Yeast's arc is all about learning to appreciate friendship. Although Flour appears to start in a similar position to Yeast, their arc is actually completely different. Flour starts out pretty full of themselves. As I mentioned before, they completely overshadow Salt, both in character design and in the show. This is for a reason. The reason why the second mixing arc was so rough is because Flour was so incredibly stubborn that it caused the whole team a great deal of grief. Throughout the rising arcs, though, Flour learned to become a better friend by lending their strength to Yeast and cooperating with Water. Flour's cooperation with Water was essential to holding the team together, and helping Yeast paid off in more ways than one. Flour learned how to empower their friends by making them stronger. The ability that Flour developed himself, gluten, even served to enhance Yeast's skill by capturing gas. Because of Flour's help, Yeast was able to expand their ability to produce the carbon dioxide essential in the final battle. Flour also showed their character growth in a more direct way in the final battle, where they insisted on protecting their friends by surrounding them in a hard crust. This shows just how far Flour has gone, from hindering their teammates in battle to keeping them safe. Truly, by the end of the show, Flour has learned to consider the feelings and well-being of their teammates. In essence, Flour's arc is all about learning to be a good friend. Salt had a shaky identity in the show from the start. They'd been overshadowed by their friend Flour in both appearance and strength, and seemed to have an almost insignificant role in the show, almost disappearing. Obviously, this makes Salt very insecure and bitter because they feel as though they've been a burden to their friends. Of course, as the audience, we know that this is not true. Salt brings flavor to the team in a way that no other member is able to. It's only Salt that doesn't realize this, though it is implied in the epilogue that they later do. Salt as a character is supposed to show us that we oftentimes don't realize our own personal worth because we look at what other people are doing. Salt doesn't realize their own potential because they keep comparing themselves to their friends. In a way, we are all Salt. A lot of us don't realize the unique potential within us because society only gives us a certain set of ways to succeed instead of acknowledging that there are many more ways of living a worthwhile life. You must always remember that you don't have to be Flour, Water, or Yeast. You can be Salt, and I think that's a very important message. Bread explores friendship in more ways than one, successfully conveying the yearning for friendship that many people face, while also asking us to appreciate friendship and to meaningfully consider the well-being of those important to you. Bread even explores friendship to the level of nuance of telling you to forge an identity separate from your friends, in order to recognize your own unique importance. With all of this complex messaging, it is clear that Bread is the epitome of genius. No other piece of media can compare to this ageless classic. Anime of the century. I don't think anybody would disagree.